So while it may appear as if these strawberries, which are produced and grown in the US, will not be affected by the US tariffs, the farmer will need fertilizers as well as machinery. So to the extent that he cannot find any domestic substitutes, all these will have to be imported and will suffer tariff tax, and that will translate to a higher cost of these strawberries that will be exported to Singapore. Hi, my name is Ying, a senior lecturer at NTU Singapore. I teach taxation and its impact to the real world to students at Nanyang Business School. So tariffs are actually a tax imposed on the import of goods. So how it works is that it's usually imposed based on the value of the imported goods. So let's say if the value of goods imported is $100 and it is a tariff tax of 10%, then the importer will have to pay, in addition to the $100 to the supplier, an additional $10 that will be given to the government. Well, if you look at how the US are imposing these tariffs, it would appear to be quite broad sweeping, and there is this baseline of 10%. So I would imagine that eventually it would impact quite a number of goods that everyone is using. Of course, there are some exemptions: pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, as well as electronics. Singapore being a very international global trading hub, a lot of these imported items from the US are meant for export to other countries. Of course, there are some items that are directly imported for consumption, such as agricultural produce. Even for such items, they will still be affected by the tariffs. For example, if you talk about, say, strawberries and blueberries being imported from the US, those farmers will have to import machinery or fertilizers from overseas. They may not be able to find equivalent substitutes from domestic producers. And each of these tariffs imposed at various levels and as various inputs to the business will all add up. Tariffs basically increase the cost of the import of goods. It will favour domestic production because then goods produced domestically will be cheaper than goods that are imported. For a lot of goods, there may be difficulties to produce these goods domestically. Even if you were to produce domestically, prices of these goods are not static, so they may actually also increase to levels that are just below the price of import of goods, and that will just increase the cost of goods to consumers. So Singapore is a major trading hub. We import to export, and our major export markets are in fact China and the US. Singapore does have a very good geographical location, and we do have a very reliable infrastructure when it comes to being a transport node for the various companies that do global production. And our major export items include machinery and equipment parts. If, let's say, the export of China goods to the US is dampened, there will be a decrease in the demand for Singapore exports to China that would adversely impact the production levels in Singapore as well, because there will be a less demand for our products overseas. Well, Singapore is already in a pretty good fiscal position to see what measures can be implemented to help stabilize the economy. When it comes to the export of goods, you need to look at where these goods are manufactured. So if Singapore is merely an import-export node, then these goods would not be considered as originating from Singapore. If, however, Singapore does play a role in the manufacturing of these goods, such that it's transformed quite significantly in Singapore, then it will be considered as an export of goods from Singapore to the US, and that could be quite attractive for our investors, because Singapore's exports to the US will only be subject to, at the moment anyway, the 10% baseline tariffs, as opposed to some other countries where their exports to the US may suffer higher tariff rates. So in Singapore, I think our advantage is that we are not starting from ground zero. For example, the petrochemical, the machinery, semiconductor sectors, we do have vibrant manufacturing activities in Singapore. So it would be a matter of our investors or our businesses here deciding whether they want to do more and what kind of other value-added activities they want to conduct in Singapore.